Guys, the super pros are hedging their bets on a particular class of apartments that are doing exceptionally well. We're going to talk about the under 50 meter squared apartments today. Stay tuned. VASCO DUARTE, the absolute expert in big funding, working for HTL. VASCO, what is it exactly that you do?
So we manage individuals, high net and their families, high net individuals that focus. They have a need to look at their debt, their investments, and asset allocation as they look to transition a lot of that money to their kids. Is that quick enough?
Is that called ultra net high net worth?
High net worth. Oh, high net worth.
You're dealing with the really smart people, super smart people with money.
I don't know if it's super smart. I do know they need help. Put it.
Stunning. I'm really interested this morning to hear about the patterns of what these guys are doing. Billy, welcome this morning.
Thank you, Vasco. Good to have you back. This is an interesting asset class. It's the one that is essential. It's essential to people getting into the market. It's essential to people that have some spare, liquidity, borrowing capacity. They want to spend it, but you're telling us there's a struggle to do so.
I had and this came about. I had a client that for one of their kids were looking to get into the market, and it was very simple. When we started looking at where to place the debt, most of the lenders, because the units were 40 square meters, no one really could lend them the money. But if you look at this asset class and you look at the yield that he was producing, the gross yield, it was a 695 unit inner west producing a 4.89 gross yield. So if you then look at the opportunity for a first home buyer to get into that market, or even as an investor to then rent it out, the entry point is a lot less. So he's and the restrictions start to then come about from a lender's perspective. And this, I think there's a myth around, what does APRA involved and what's the banks willing to do.
Enlighten us.
So so that then being said, there is no restriction at a council level how many units you need to have in a one-bedroom unit. So at a federal level or state level, there is no restrictions. If we then look at APRA and APRA's restrictions, they look at servicing ability to service, liquidity of the banks. Again, the opportunity then lends itself around the insurance company and the bank. Do they have the appetite to lend them the money or not? And I think this is where historically this has been the place where lenders do not want to open up their books to smaller sized apartments, because ultimately the pool that wants to get into that market versus a 2-bedroom or a studio is a lot smaller. If you then start thinking a little bit broader, where the opportunity has set with other providers, like you talk about Igloo or you talk about student accommodation, they are dominated, at least the group, some of them, and they are making really good returns because no one else can get in. So I think if we rethink the way especially in capital cities or cities where there's a lot of population, the one bedroom and the studio would be, if lenders could lend client first home buyers at least the 95% or 90%. Then we'll start to open up the opportunity for us to then, not have this pressure around housing. Also, as we start sort of thinking a little bit further out, the developers would then start producing smaller units. In the US, in Europe, this is a very common occurrence. You look, if you guys have been to Japan, you'll see the size of those units. I'm not saying go and do 20 square meter units, but 40 square meter units internal plus a garage in a balcony is not something that's really out of scope.
And look, I think design elements have changed. The Design Code of Australia, I know, with residential, they have to blend the amount of what they do within new buildings in areas in most areas of Sydney. So they can't do all three bedders, or they can't do all studios. But certainly developers do shy away from doing those smaller ones. There's definitely been a change. They were small, Vasco. Apartments were small. They had no balconies. This was in the 30s and 40s. Then in the 60s and 70s, they were pretty small with balconies. Then then we started getting bigger internally and bigger on the outside. What happened to that beloved studio apartment with no balcony you see around Potts Point and stuff like that? I think it's becoming cool. Not saying my daughter's cool, but on her age group, there's a couple of them that are living in them at the moment. They're getting huge rent. They're paying big money for rent for these. I think it's gone back to being the smaller is pretty cool, but they want nice things. They want good quality finishes, good quality bathrooms, which these guys are doing. Is there going to be any assistance from government, or does there need to be any assistance from government to sort of progress this small footplate with first home buyers, as an example?
I think that's where it sits. There's got to be an activation sitting there. Personally, if we start thinking about governments or it's supporting with first home grants and supporting how to get into the market, and pushing everyone out of the cities is probably not the solution for everybody. So I really think it's an activation of government. There's an activation, obviously, of some of the regulatory bodies to make sure the insurance companies are still there to support this type of. So I think it's a three-stage approach. It can't just be one of those parties.
Is it mortgage insurance that you're referring to when you say insurance companies?
Yeah, mortgage insurance, especially for the first home buyer, because let's just say, high net wealth individuals that have equity sitting in their place of residence, they can go and borrow money out of that title, or they can just borrow, call it 80%. The thing is more, let's open up to everybody, and those first home buyers is where the opportunity sits. Because at the moment, you've got corporates buying these units or studios. They're using them as a student or short-term letting, or then the opportunity. Then, if you open it up to those first-home buyers, it allows for a lot more entry and people going, well, if I can buy a $695,000 apartment, say $700,000, one bedroom, why do I need to go and move out of suburbia, say, to go further out?
VASCO, what are the clients doing in the interim to get deals across the line? Are they pumping up their deposits?
Yeah, great question.
Guarantees? What are they doing?
They usually go and use their prime place or the investment property where they got equity, and they take the money out of that, the deposit, and then they go to the bank and say, well, how much can you lend me? 60, 80%, say. Or they just use the full equity that they've got in other assets and borrow against that and leave the particular unit unencumbered. So there is no mortgage on it.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. And so you're suggesting that the rate of return on the money invested is stronger the smaller the unit?
I think your entry point is smaller, number one. So, but the return, the gross yield that you get out of these, I don't know, Mark, you see a lot of one-bedroom units in studios towards the Northern Beaches, I'm sure. But, at $650 a week for a $695,000 purchase, let within a week for this particular client, I think that's not a bad return to get in, 12 months lease. But there's others, obviously, that I've seen in the market, especially on this side, at $700 a week.
Billy, are the tenants moving out quicker in these ones, or they stay just as long?
It's funny. I had this conversation on the weekend. they stay just as long. Particularly, I'm selling a studio at the moment in a building where there's a lift. That's quite attractive to an older client, you know, that wants just a base, wants something really self-sufficient. It's the yields are great, the leases are great, and the properties are not big enough where the wear and tear is astronomical. Generally, it's a single or a couple. So even if you're not getting the longest longevity out of your lease, the turnover, it doesn't actually matter as much because you're not getting house sharers in. The properties are really well maintained.
Sounds like a killer of an asset class. So, what learnings from VASCO today? VASCO, can you sum it up for us?
Okay, so my big thing is that, you know, if you've got a family member that wants to buy get into the market, you can still help them. Number one. Number two, the asset class, if you're looking at getting a yield as you're looking at retirement, this is probably not a bad way to look at it. You grab a couple of these, you know, super fund, wherever it might be, you've got liquidity, it's going to give you a good yield. And ultimately there's a lot of demand for it. And as long as it's in areas that, you know, student accommodation could be, or you know, couples moving into the cities. So, and I think as the opportunity cost, I think in the long term, the government needs to look at this, the federal, and not just the federal, but APRA and the insurance companies, and start to create a product that's a little bit more flexible for people to get in. So that's the three things I sort of look at, Mark and Billy.
And again, I'm very, very surprised that they haven't acknowledged and supported this the way you're suggesting earlier, because I've never seen any volatility with tenants. I've never seen any volatility with selling them. I've never seen any volatility with the type of people that buy them. They are as stable, as good, as strong, maybe even stronger than most other asset classes out there, yet they're treated sometimes like a hot potato.
I think that's the drop the mic moment. Sorry for what figure to speak, to say the bad debt sitting in these are minimal to zero. Like there is nothing in where the banks will say this balance sheet is driven bad debt sitting in these smaller units. It's just not. And
but it would be fair to say that the funders poo-poo it, and it would be fair to say that consumers poo-poo it. A sector, and what I mean by that, I think it's important to acknowledge, is I will put it under a buyer's nose, and some of them will go, "Oh no," and it's like, what? You want an investment? What's wrong with that? So there, it does sit not only in what we're suggesting in, you know, lenders' mind as a bit of poison, but it does also sit in some sectors of the market. Like you'll tell mum and dad are going, no, you don't buy that. They shouldn't. There's no just or founded reason. I think you're right. On all performance aspects, they do well. Capital growth, they do just as well as anything else.
Yeah, I think it's that stigma, because people go to the lender, the banks, and they go, "Oh no, can't do that." You know, there's this view of 2-bedroom versus 1-bedroom, and I think Billy sort of, you know, is mentioning that, you know, these people, the people that are looking to rent, they usually sublease that second room either way, or they rent it out to some third party, and that third party usually creates problems anyway. So we're sort of talking about the same issue around tenants.
This whole stigma is driven and keeps circulating because the loan can't be achieved in the first place. So the reason people will not, you know, educate themselves and change their mindset on this is because they've had problems to begin with. People before them had problems with this. It's not moving forward. So, you know, when they come to resale, they'll have problems with it. And so, you know, I think that's why the stigma's there. That's why people are saying we won't touch it.
Look,
relatively, we're a young country. You look at US, you look at Europe, you look at Japan, and they use them. I think we all need to start looking at this if we really want to solve the housing shortage. That's fundamentally.
I think it's a 3 out of 3 vote, boys.
Done.
It's a 3 out of 3 vote. I don't think any of us are in disagreement. Under 50 meters squared, rocks. It's a great category to be in and should be supported more by banks, government, and insurer and lending mortgage insurers, LMI.
Done.
And Vasco, how do people
Yeah.
contact you, and what do they contact you for if they need you?
Yeah, great question. So on the you'll see my contact details within LinkedIn. HTL Private Office, got the website. You can hit me up, message me, my number. I'll put it on the chat for you guys later on. But yeah, love to help. I think being long enough in the industry, if I can't, I'm sure someone else that I know will, and love to have conversations with anyone. So. Yeah, hit me up.
Need advice, need money, call Vasco.
Yes, we're here for it. That's for sure.
Billy, thank you very much. The young
Right.
man in the old man stuck in a young man's body. Thank you.
So true. Thanks, gents. Have a good day.
Cheers. Bye.